everyone. I hope that you're well wherever you're at in the world. My name is Heather with the Goddess Keys, and let's talk about shadow work and why it's unavoidable. And I know that this might sound like a topic that's been talked about quite often, but I'm going to give you a different spin on it. So, one thing that I study a lot is the architecture of the false matrix simulation. A lot of times we hear talk around how we're trapped in the matrix, how we need to unplug from the matrix, detach from the matrix, but how do we fully detach from something without knowing the mechanics of it? The more you can know about the mechanics of the simulation, of the way that sometimes consciousness is suppressed or controlled within our holographic reality, the more we understand that, the more we're able to retrieve our energy and become more self-sourcing and actually create the storylines that we actually want to see manifest within our reality. Now, in order to do that, though, you really want to think about all of the different programs that may have been scripted for you. A lot of times this depends upon your bloodline. This depends upon, a lot around your ancestry, okay? And if your ancestors were plugged into different storylines, it's very possible that you are going to end up playing out that storyline unless you are able to reprogram your reality and see something different, okay? And plan something different for yourself. But there is something called the Tree of Life. There's an architecture known as the Tree of Life that, you'll find this in many, many different religions or schools of thought, something around the Tree of Life. And this is supposed to be the source of all knowledge, especially as it relates to the knowledge on planet Earth. But one thing, as you learn more about the architecture of the false matrix simulation, you also realize that there's an artificial nature to the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life, a lot of times, can be the motherboard of the false matrix simulation. But when we think about the Tree of Life, because a lot of spiritual seekers will have heard about the Tree of Life and studied it, a lot of times we think about the upward facing tree, okay? And so this in Kabbalah, they have the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. There's a Kemetic Tree of Life. There's lots of different Tree of Life symbolisms, right, that you could delve down. I would actually say they mostly come from the same creators, the beings who created the false matrix simulation. They have some kind of a Tree of Life template, and they've shared different versions of it across different cultures, okay? Now, that's the upward facing tree. There's also a downward facing tree, all right? And this is known as the Qlippoth. This is the shadow realm. This is the upside down. So if you've seen Stranger Things, that's a really great example of the Qlippoth, okay? And that's a part of the false matrix simulation architecture. That's the dark web of the false matrix simulation. And a lot is run through the Qlippoth. So if you were looking at the upward facing Tree of Life, that would be your different light body. That's like you cultivating your light body. So that's your chakras. A lot of times there's a chakra attached to each sephira on the Tree of Life. There's a color attached. There's different sets of life lessons within these spheres, or actually within these realms, within these different realities, okay? So these spheres are connected to our astrological birth chart a lot of times as well. So there's definitely certain symbols. There's also numbers. There's also a numerical sequence that you can tap into, okay? But as within, so without. As above, so below. So if you are navigating yourself out of the architecture of the false matrix simulation, you kind of need to know about that downward facing tree. So you got the Tree of Life, and then you got the Tree of Death. And so a lot of us, especially if we've identified as light workers and whatnot, we don't really want to talk about the Tree of Death. We want to kind of get out of all of that darker shadow energy, and we want to face towards the light and cultivate our light bodies. But that leaves us in a state of imbalance, and it also leads us in a state of defenselessness when it comes to energetic and psychic attacks, okay? Because we have a shadow body out there somewhere doing its own thing that we haven't claimed, because we don't want to kind of think about all that nastiness, right? And so we want to just focus on the light, and that's what the spiritual gurus mostly tell us to do, just focus on the positive. Meanwhile, our shadow aspect of self is running rampant somewhere in the false matrix simulation, okay? Now, why might you want to learn a little bit about the Qlippoth? I'm not saying initiate in the Qlippoth. However, the Qlippoth, if you start learning about that, it's connected to different demonic hierarchies and what have you. It's also connected a lot to like the monetary system and whatnot. If you don't know or have an understanding that you might be connected to the Qlippoth in some kind of way, then you might end up in Qlippothic scripts, hell realm scripts in your reality. And if you are a part of an ancestral lineage that maybe is more of a Qlippothic kind of nature, maybe more trauma happens in a particular family bloodline, then you could end up in a very specific script with that family member or those group of family members if you don't do your due diligence to revoke soul contracts or reprogram and retrain your subconscious mind out of that tree of death, okay? So the tree of life actually is a part of a closed loop system too. It's meant to kind of keep us kept in this closed loop false matrix system. And the tree of death is also closed loop, okay? So a lot of times people will start studying the Qlippoth as a way to reclaim their power from the false matrix, but they get too caught up in the ideology of the Qlippoth because it can become a religion just like anything else. Just like the Kabbalistic tree of life is connected to a lot of ideology. But it's also a part of the architecture that you can find universally within the false matrix simulation. So it's something you want to learn about so that you can detach your consciousness from it. And this is something I'm going to be diving more into depth with. I will be sharing a lot of materials that are around the shadow integration, okay? Because I find that that's something that's really important to have. If you are seeking like consciousness expansion, instead of always focusing in on the light, it's important to cultivate your light body, but also to cultivate your shadow body, and then a sacred marriage of the two. This is higher self integration, okay? It's the marriage of the higher and the lower self, okay? A lot was done in the false matrix simulation to basically split our consciousness and to keep us in a state of duality, this like bipolar kind of nature. But now as we are working to evolve, we're merging the polarity, okay? We're merging the light with the dark, and that is divine union. So divine union actually is the merging of the light body and the shadow body. Not just the cultivation of the light body and then a clearing of the shadow body. Usually we want to like do shadow work to get away from the shadow or to mitigate it, to make it go away. But that is a part of a false teaching. Your shadow is not just trauma. Darkness is just not, doesn't just have to be about pain. It's actually a part of the source of creation. Okay, so we need to also re-identify and reimagine our relationship with darkness in order to go into this higher self integration. So a lot of people though might be pushing back on some of this content and maybe saying like, well, I don't believe in the Qlippoth. I don't believe in the tree of life. Like, this isn't running my reality. The way I would describe it is like, it's a video game program. So the false matrix simulation has different video games for us. And, we will run different scripts. So some people are designed within this false matrix hologram to always win. Okay. And so they're going to have a much more luxurious or cooler life script that they're following, where things just tend to come easier to them. There's other people though that may be a part of a Qlippothic script, a tree of death script, where you're constantly finding that things around you are turning traumatic, right? And that's because there's a level of extreme shadow work that you're meant to do. But a lot of times, until you activate that healing through the shadow, your greatest gift is going to seem like your greatest weakness. Okay. And so, for people who are more inclined to alchemize the shadow, then you would really want to think about your nature with the Qlippoth, okay? Because you might have been put in Qlippothic scripts, okay? Now, Qlippoth, remember, that is kind of the underworld. That's the underbelly. So you might be in weird underworld sort of soul contracts or underbelly kind of life scripts. And you'll know because you'll feel oppressed by certain storylines that are going in your life. And it might seem as though they're looping and looping and looping. Your bloodline might be a part of a Qlippothic script, okay? And it's important to see this outside of like just being spell work or just being a curse. So a lot of times you'll go to different like spiritual healers and they'll get you to get a curse off of you, right? Or they'll help you with a very specific aspect of your life that's giving you a lot of trauma or drama. And that's good and that's helpful. But if you are like locked into a Qlippothic script, you are treating the symptom when you lift a curse, okay? But the actual problem, the source of the problem is the hardware of the game that you're playing. It's the game that you're in. You need to switch games. You're in like some weird underworld hell realm video game. And if that's not what you want to be in, like if you thrive in that, and some people do, some people really, that's why when you're like waking up and you're trying to like reclaim your life, the people around you a lot of times are looking at you like you're crazy, or they don't understand you because some of them like the script that they're in. You know, some people like that underworld kind of energy. Some people thrive in it. And I think like the services that I offer will support you with navigating. You know, if you're in an underworld script, then the first step is self-defense and defending yourself in that and clearing your energy and your template so that a lot of the things that are like written out for you to manifest in your reality don't come to pass. So that's step one. But at some point, you also need to rewrite the script, you know, understand that you are a part of a certain life script that is out of alignment with your growth and expansion. You know, there's a certain point where you learn through trauma, okay? But then you get to a point where you're done with the trauma script, okay? And so that's when you choose to author your own reality, author your own script, okay? And this is why you want to look more at the architecture of the world that you're living in. These trees of life, the tree of life, the tree of death, that is a part of the architecture of the false matrix simulation. And if you're caught up in a part of that architecture, a lot of times you might end up feeling really oppressed by that. Okay, so you want to get out of the script by getting out of the building that the script is running in, if that makes any sense. And so that requires a really deep level of shadow integration, learning the ins and outs of your subconscious mind. A lot of times you're retrieving soul fragments from different hell realms, okay? This has been planned out for you from a very young age, so you may have been caught up in these kinds of weird hell realm types of scripts even as a young child. And so a part of your work now is retrieving different fragments of soul which have fractured from these different hell realms. Okay, so this is why I offer the shamanic meditations that I do. So if this is something that you're ready to really dive into, you can check out the Patreon that I have, which has tons of guided meditations, affirmations, and subliminals for very specific situations. And I'm also expanding my online store right now. So there's been some different attunements that I placed to support folks with this. And this is what I do in my one-on-one coaching sessions. A lot of times you might realize that you're in somewhat of a hell realm that you are now looking to clear from your template and you're ready for a new experience. And that's kind of usually when I I gravitate towards certain people's lives, okay? It's kind of when you've tried all of the stuff that Google told you to try, that Chat GPT told you to try, but you're not quite getting anywhere. You might need that little extra shamanic touch. That's where I come in. And it's really just to support you with bringing you back to your innermost self and your innermost truth. And that's the work that I do with folks. But there's so much content out there right now about your light body and cultivating your light body. And you'll still see that content from me, but I am going to be taking a deeper dive into the darkness and the shadow realm, okay? Because that is where healing and integration also occurs. It's also the integration of the shadow, and it's not just an afterthought. And then you basically overemphasize the light. There needs to be a balance within this in order to promote greater balance and equilibrium on the planet right now. And so that means shadow integration, not just clearing your shadow, not just getting rid of your shadow, but like truly integrating your shadow. Okay, that is what's being called for a lot of us at this time. And to do this, there's certain ways that you need to set your energy field up, things that you're not going to find in your average New Age spiritual text. All right. There's a certain way that you'll need to protect your energy. And it's not what we have been typically taught or conditioned to believe. All right. It is about merging the light with the dark and doing that in all realms and dimensions, as well as with our energetic field as well. So this is what I'm going to be sharing more with folks around, and specifically working on the shadow right now too, because that's a part of your higher self. And I think that's something that we have intentionally been taught the opposite, to keep us topsy-turvy and to keep us from evolving, okay? But sometimes there's a reason why we've been taught to be afraid of the dark. We've been taught to see the dark as evil. There's a lot of programs around it. And at the same time, you literally might be plugged into a dark, shadowy program, a program of death, a program where tragedy happens a lot. And, you know, a part of the shadow integration is learning that and then retrieving your power from that so that you can create with more joy. Okay, things don't have to be trauma infused all the time. If you're ready to transcend that kind of storyline, well, then resources are out there to support you with this. So if you're interested in learning more about some of the services I offer, then you can connect with me. Sending out lots of love, joy, and peace until we meet again. Bye, y'all.